Welcome, everyone. We're going to get started. We'll shortly be joined by Mayor Walsh, and I look forward to his presence here with us this morning. My name is Graham Wilson, and I'm the director of the Boston University Initiative on Cities. Our office was founded 5 years ago by myself, the late great Mayor of Boston, Tom Menino. Our goal was to bridge the gap between the academic study of cities and the real-life practice of urban governance. This conference is very much what we aspire to doing, bringing together experts, practitioners, and a perspective from literally all around the world to address an important issue. Shelter is one of the most basic human needs. Home is one of the most important emotionally. Unfortunately, many of our fellow citizens struggle to meet these key needs. You struggle with these problems every day. The quest for answers is urgent, and so is the need to learn from each other. We're pleased to be able to join the commissioners with peers from around the world who are dealing with similar challenges to help inspire new ideas and tools. We have a full day that will include presentations by our speakers. But we've designed this conference to provide for substantial discussion between speakers and participants, both Americans and international guests. So, like I say to my students, it'll be a lot more fun if you speak up and talk. Our conference sponsors and partners have made this event possible. Thanks so much to City Community Development, the Rockefeller Foundation, both of whom have been such great partners of the Initiative on Cities over the years on several issues. Thanks also to the Lincoln Institute of Land Policy and Enterprise Community Partners. We look forward to continuing and deepening our partnership with you all. I want to thank, in advance of his arrival, Mayor Marty Walsh for joining us, and I'll introduce him shortly. And we're especially grateful to Sheila Dillon, Boston's Chief of Housing, who provided early and invaluable guidance which helped shape this program. We're joined by Boston University President Bob Brown. President Brown has been a great supporter of the work we do at the Initiative on Cities. Really, creating it was his idea. He has a deep appreciation of the problems and opportunities facing cities. And he often remarks that when Boston thrives, Boston University thrives. He has a very keen sense of the importance of partnership between the city and the university. A special thanks to our speakers, both local and international, who've made tremendous efforts to join us and to contribute to the discussion with the U.S. Housing Commissioners. And a huge thanks to our staff who've worked so hard on this conference, particularly Stacey Fox. Now I'm pleased to introduce Bob Anibale, the Global Director of Inclusive Finance and City Community Development. City has been a tremendous friend to the Initiative on Cities over the years, supporting us on a variety of activities. And Bob, we truly appreciate the partnership that we have with you.
Thank you, Graham. Good morning, everybody. I think I'm here I'll talk slowly so we can fill in for the mayor. He's on his way too often. It's an honor for the city to be here today and to be able to participate and be a part of this forum. We have been working with Boston University's Initiative on City and Graham and the team for some time now, and we began with our work also on the Menino survey of mayors, which there's copies outside for anyone who hasn't seen them before. And it's been very helpful to us, those surveys, and also getting a gauge as to, as we go from mayor to mayor, where are the alignment of concerns and interests across our cities in the United States at least. And in doing so, housing comes up all the time. Housing comes right up at the center of that. It's great also to have this international group with us amongst today. It's very familiar to those of us at City. I live in London, one of the most unaffordable places to live. in a good way, of course, as well as we have the challenges in San Francisco and Boston. And again, I see we have colleagues from Sao Paulo, Singapore, London, Denver, New York, LA, Vienna. And as my colleagues and I live in many of those cities as well, this perhaps comes up more than almost any other issue in our discussions and amongst those in our municipalities, which is housing and the cost of, and affordability of housing and preserving affordable housing where we have it. I'd like to thank the Rockefeller Foundation, Lincoln Institute, also for an enterprise, for their partnership in doing this and inviting us to be a part of it. Sheila and Catherine from the Boston Housing Authority. And of course, when Mayor Walsh comes, it's a city, Boston, where we've done a lot with the mayor's office in the past. But you don't have to look long and far at Housing Wire's 10 least affordable housing markets, 3 of which we work on, which are in California, and I think we have at least 1 or 2 of them here today. And the scope of the challenge in so many of the places we live in, where gentrification is unfortunately resulting in displacement. And that being a dichotomy of cities which are attracting enormous investment, such as Boston or San Francisco and others, but as a result having to be very much challenged by the ability for the next generation of those already living or raised in a city to remain in a city. And in a city like this, where many will have studied to be able to begin a career, to be able to afford to live in the city. And it's become perhaps the most common discussion amongst those of us in housing is not just lack of affordability for very low income people and the lack of ability to produce as much affordable housing as required, but the preservation of what we have already. And that becoming, particularly at least in the United States, because of the way affordable housing has been structured, based on tax credits, those liens and those credits roll off, and in which case those houses become market priced again. So there's a constant effort to produce enough housing. I'm delighted that one of my colleagues will be speaking tomorrow, Richard Gerwitz. He's the co-head of our City Community Capital, which is the largest arranger of affordable housing in the U.S. And so I think he can really be able to speak more specifically on some of the structures about the housing. In San Francisco, in other cities, we've tried to work with municipalities on new models for particularly preserving affordable housing or creating them. So the interest in land trusts has been very interesting for us. We're working in cities like New York, Miami-Dade, and elsewhere on land trusts. In San Francisco, came up with a Housing Accelerator Fund, a new vehicle that could acquire properties quickly to create and preserve them, their affordability, because it just took too long to only to build new housing. And then again, other cities we've looked at areas where we could merge existing affordable housing, like in New York, to create efficiencies in managing the scale of those while preserving their affordability. So we're very excited to be able to be here today and to hear what many of you in your own cities bring to the table and how we can support that, both through the Boston Initiative here at the University, but also in your own cities where we may be present too. Thank you, Graham.
Thank you both. When the Initiative on Cities got support from the Rockefeller Foundation, I was so excited. It's always exciting to get support from a foundation, but I couldn't also help but think, what a great foundation we're getting support from. And my mind went back to some of the terrific programs and projects that the Rockefeller Foundation has supported. So I'm very happy to introduce Corinne Letourneau, Deputy Director for City Resilience Delivery North America from 100 Resilient Cities, who will speak on behalf of the Rockefeller Foundation.
Good morning. All right. I'm actually extremely honored to be here today with such an amazing group of professionals tackling one of the biggest challenges of our time. So on behalf of the Rockefeller Foundation, we want to just thank you all for joining in this important conversation, and especially want to thank the BU Initiative on Cities for convening this important conversation. We also want to thank our partners, city and enterprise community partners, for coming together to kind of help coalesce and catalyze innovations in our cities. So as you guys know, I'm the Managing Director for North America for 100 Resilient Cities, which was created by the Rockefeller Foundation 5 years ago at their 100th anniversary to address the shocks and stresses of our cities today across the world. And so what we have really seen as the best practice coming out of 100 Resilient Cities is really the network. These networks of cities coming together to kind of share information, share best practices, encourage innovation, and also foster some healthy competition, right? It never hurts to say, City X has done this. Are you interested in thinking of doing this City Y? So I encourage you all to think about that as you're sharing information today. Today's exchange is also so important as you as city leaders across the globe explore solutions to one of the greatest challenges of our time, affordable housing. In the 100 Resilient Cities Network in North America, we have seen firsthand how cities identify and address the core stress of housing affordability as one of their key resilience challenges. In our North American cities alone, 100 initiatives around those cities address housing. But this is not solely a North American challenge. As cities from Rotterdam to Christchurch to Singapore, who's here today, look at these interconnected challenges of their housing systems and try to find holistic ways to address these challenges. I know all our cities in our 100 Resilient Cities Network and all the cities that are here today are eager and excited to hear about the innovative ideas and take these ideas and implement them in their cities tomorrow. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much. I want to acknowledge that Mayor Walsh has joined us. Mayor, we're honored that you're here. I will ask you to speak in just a moment. We'll just have a few remarks first from Laura Blatchford, who's President of Enterprise Community Partners. We are so thrilled to be working with you.
Thank you. Hello. Don't want to stand between you all and the mayor. You know how that goes. I just want to echo the welcome and the thanks that have already been expressed and just put a good word in for these amazing U.S. commissioners. All of you international experts, we're going to learn a lot from you, but I hope you learn a lot from them as well. Enterprise has been convening this group, which we may need a branding help with, but for now we call it the High Cost Cities Housing Forum, and gives you a sense of what we're trying to accomplish, but really that peer-to-peer experience, we've been doing that for about a decade, and I think during that time, from the platform that we've been able to provide them, they've learned tons from each other. Sheila, I know you can speak to this, but also have just really pushed the envelope and been extremely innovative. So I know today and tomorrow will be wonderful for them, and I hope for all of you as well. So thank you and welcome to the mayor.
Now it's my honor to introduce Mayor Walsh, Mayor of the City of Boston. Mayor Walsh is focused on the challenge of ensuring that Boston is an equitable city by supporting thoughtful growth while building a housing supply that is affordable to residents across all income levels. And he's had that emphasis from the very beginning of his administration. His housing goals center on the production of new housing, the preservation of existing affordable housing, and the protection of those households most at risk. Boston remains on target to meet the mayor's goals and keep pace with the city's growing population. These are not easy challenges, but last year, the onward march of rents in Boston was halted. Following his remarks, the mayor will take one or two questions from the housing commissioners, if time allows, as he must leave by 9:45 to make other meetings. Mayor Walsh, thank you again for welcoming the commissioners and international guests to Boston. Please join us at the podium.
Thank you very much, Graham. I'm going to shut this down. Hopefully it doesn't close things. Oh, sugar, sorry. You know who I am. I want to thank you, Graham, for that introduction. And Thank you for putting the timeline on this. I like that. I'll probably speak way beyond when I'm supposed to be here, so anyway, it's okay. I want to thank Bob Brown, President Bob Brown, and BU for hosting us today. Thank you, Catherine, and thank you all the team here at Boston University. I want to congratulate and welcome the newest addition to the team, Congressman Mike Capuano, for being here. Thank you, Mike. To all of the partners that are here, thank you for coming. To all the visitors and guests, thank you for being in the city, and please feel free to spend as much money as you want in the city over the next couple of days, as long as you're here. I truly appreciate it. I want to thank you for working on national housing policy as we move forward here, and not just policy, but challenges that we're facing as a city, as a state, as a country, in some cases as a world. My family is from Ireland, and oftentimes I'll have government officials come into the office from Ireland, and we'll ask about the biggest challenges, and they talk about sea level rise, they talk about economic development, but they talk about housing. I was in Cabo Verde a couple weeks ago, and they were talking about economic development. They were talking about housing and creating more opportunities for housing, because what's happening there is people are moving into the major cities. They're coming to Praia, and that's where all the jobs are, and it really is about how do we create more housing stock. And so this issue that we're faced with here in Boston, it truly is a global issue. And I want to thank all of you in this room for your part, what you're doing on this issue, and thank you for working. While you're here in Boston, tomorrow's opening day for the Red Sox, so I hope you get a chance to enjoy it. If you stick around long enough, next Monday is the Boston Marathon. If you're running in the marathon, I'll be cheering you on. If you're not running in the marathon and you're in Boston, I hope you enjoy the marathon. Mike Capuano asked me a minute ago, how come you don't run the marathon? Because one of the roles as the mayor of Boston is to crown the male winner. So there's no way that I could finish in time to crown the male winner, so I can't. That excuse is going to be used for a little while. We're blessed here in Boston. We have an amazing team doing housing, and that team, and all of you, if you don't know her fully, you'll know her after this, is Sheila Dillon, our Chief of Housing, and she is absolutely amazing. She's the chair of the High Cross Cities Housing Forum. She's been an incredible leader and somebody who is passionate about the issues of housing and takes it personal. And a lot of times when people work in an area, they take a personal 9 to 5 when they're at work, but when they go home, the job is over. And Sheila's constantly thinking of ways of how do we continue to create more housing, in particular more affordable housing, and how do we make sure that we reach out to the communities and people and let them know to be part of the conversation. When I took office in 2014, I got elected mayor of Boston in 2014. I was a state representative, and I served in the legislature for 16 years before that. The main priority was housing, and we made housing a priority. We witnessed and we're experiencing the way the city was headed. We're a growing city, and we realized that we were in the midst of a housing crisis. We had all these people wanting to move back to Boston that were baby boomers, that had moved out in the 70s and 80s and 90s, and they wanted to come back. And we had all these young millennials that were coming to school here in Boston, in the greater Boston area, about 250,000 strong, and they wanted to stay here in Boston. Boston became an option for them. Where in the past, the options were New York and San Francisco and LA and other places. They wanted to stay in the city of Boston. And then we had people that lived here, grew up here, and they wanted to live here as well. So we realized that all of these different streams on the market were hurting us. And the economy took off. And the economy has been an incredible economy. In the last 5 years, we've added over 100,000 new jobs just in the city of Boston alone. Not in the greater Boston area, in the city of Boston alone. Our population is near 700,000 people. That's the first time since the 1950s that we had a population spike like that. In the 80s, the population went down to about 560, 540, and then incrementally started to go back up. And in the last 5 years, I think unofficially the numbers are about 50,000 new people have moved into Boston in the last 5 years. So when you think about that, 100,000 new people coming in for work, 50,000 new people living in the city of Boston, there's a lot of strain there. So I should be talking about transportation as well today. But we're a very different city than we were back in the 1950s. We have more young adults, we have more elderly residents, and we have a larger immigrant community, immigrant population, believe it or not, today than we did in the 50s. 28% of the people that live in the city of Boston were born in another country. 48% of the people who live in the city of Boston are first generation like I am. So nearly 75% of our city is one boat ride or plane ride away from being an immigrant. So you think about our community we're an high immigrant community. We needed our housing supply to catch up with our population. And we also had to look at matching our supply to the needs of all of our residents, not just some of our residents. And that's what our housing plan did. We put together a housing plan. We assembled a task force of experts and practitioners and people from the community. We started to look at each goal and category of housing and how do we create housing. It's not just simply about building more housing. It's about how do we work with our colleges and universities to have on-campus housing so that we can free up housing stock in the neighborhoods, because our students are living in certain parts of our community and they've literally taken over whole neighborhoods. BU is one of those examples. Many kids from BU live in the Austin area and they've taken over a whole neighborhood, blocks of housing. The kids come in here and pay crazy money for 7 months, over $1,000 a month each student. Sometimes there's 4 or 5 in an apartment. And you think about somebody who owns a 2-family and they have 5 rooms, well, that's a lot of money for them in the course of a month. So they're not going to rent to a family. They're going to say, let's get the students in here. So we thought about how do we create equity there and work with our colleges and other areas, senior housing and elderly housing and a whole bunch of other categories of housing. We set strategies to achieve them. We updated our inclusionary development policy for the first time. We differentiated areas of the city. We wanted to make sure that when somebody built high-end housing, that they weren't taking their affordability and putting it somewhere in the city of Boston, because what was happening is we were becoming a city of poor housing in one neighborhoods or in certain neighborhoods, and we said, how do we make sure that we have a mixed-use system? So in the downtown Boston, as we're thinking, and we're not there yet in Boston, so don't quote me saying we have mixed-use downtown Boston, because we don't. But we changed IDP so that as people build high-end housing, we're going to try and focus on more housing in that area and come up with policies and plans to build more low-income housing in the city of Boston, so people who don't have high income have the opportunity to live in the downtown core of our city. And again, we're not there yet, but we have the policy. We changed the policy to achieve that goal. The results that we've had has been positive. In 2018, the policy created 546 units. That's 21% of all the units produced through IDP since its launch in the year 2000. So we really started to see the gains. Inclusionary development started in 2000. We changed that policy around 2015, and we're seeing the gains of this policy now with more housing being built, low-income housing. It takes a little time, but we're seeing the benefit of that. This year, we're proposing to strengthen this policy and have it apply to even more projects, and we're going to continue to make investments. So that's one area of investment, because we don't have a lot of partners in this area. What can we do as a city to really create opportunities for more housing? And IDP was one of those areas. Second area is the Community Preservation Act. This is a local surcharge tax to fund affordable housing, open space, and historic preservation. The voters of Boston in 2001 voted this down. I think it was 60-40, maybe 70-30 in 2001, because they said we didn't want to put a tax on ourselves. But we were able to convince, working with stakeholders and business leaders and everybody, we were able to convince and talk to the voters of Boston, when in 2015 they supported overwhelmingly 70-30. The voters of Boston, the homeowners of Boston, voted to put a surcharge on their tax property to create this fund to put more money into affordable housing, open space, historic preservation. So it can be done if it's explained to people, and if people understand the fact that there's a need for housing. People will pay for it, and they will help us pay for it. Last month, we advanced 56 projects. We just started, so we had a pot of money, more than $34 million of funding this year. The Community Preservation Act, those of you that don't know what it is, it's a fund that was created by the legislature back in, I think, the early 2000s. That was money that if cities and towns put a surcharge on their property tax, 1%, 2%, or 3% surcharge, the legislature would fund a fund that would fully fund, match you dollar for dollar. The problem is we don't have a dollar-for-dollar match. Right now, because we got into it, there's about 200 cities and towns into it, the match is about 17, 18 cents on the dollar. It's still money, but we're working with the legislature right now to make some adjustments, some changes, so we can get that up to 50 cents per dollar. And we're going to be looking at surcharges on deeds of new housing. So it's a way to get money into the economy. We created a neighborhood homes initiative to get city-owned parcels into affordable housing production with with nonprofit developer Sheila and her team started with small pieces of property where we own these 4,000, 5,000 lots in neighborhoods, and we said let's get those things on the tax rolls, let's get them built, let's put housing on them, let's create programs for first-time home buyers, and hundreds and hundreds of housing have been built, units of housing have been built in the city of Boston, 1, 2, 3 family homes that we're able to sell for first-time home buyers and put more production on the line. We're also doing with larger piece of land as well. We increased the resources for the first time for home buyers program. Home ownership and access to home ownership is an essential part of what we want to do, rebuilding the middle class. So we've set a goal of 1,000 new homeowners this year. And another program that we're working to work with folks. It's not all about low income, because what happens if we don't start working with middle class housing, and we don't create housing stock, two things are going to happen. One is they're going to leave the city of Boston and move somewhere else, or two, they're going to become low income because they can't afford anything else other than their rent. So we're working to create more opportunities for first-time home buyers. We also integrated our housing plan with Imagine Boston 2030. What Imagine Boston 2030 is a master planning for the city of Boston. The last time Boston had a master planning process was in the 1950s. And it was an economic development master plan. And what came of that master plan is what you saw with the downtown skyline. And I would probably argue extend to Cambridge as well, their skyline. And for many years, we didn't have a plan, and we created a plan by talking to community members. And the plan didn't just have housing and economic development, it had transportation, arts and culture, education, climate change, sea level rise, all of the different pieces. And we went out, we spoke to over 20,000 Bostonians who came and gave us ideas and feedback. So we have a document now that's a living, breathing document that we're looking at trans-oriented development. And a major part of that is housing. And how do we create economic development opportunities, and how do we make sure there's housing opportunities with that as well. So we're working to continue to align our housing strategy with our goals in transportation. As I said earlier, 150,000 people either living or working here in the last 5 years. That strains our system. We're also working on climate action and making sure we're a coastal city. We have issues with sea level rise. We have issues with everything that we all deal with. We know what the issues are. It's part of our plan. And we also have a conversation about jobs and open space and creating open space. When I became mayor 5 years ago, one thing that we wanted to make sure was that everyone was in a 10-minute walk of a park in the city of Boston. And last year we were able to get there. We were at about 97% when I became the mayor. We were able to create that opportunity. We're the first city on the East Coast. There's 2 cities in America that are within a 10-minute walk of a park, every single resident in their city, Seattle and Boston. And it's a challenge for the rest of us to get there, so we're going to continue to work there. We made sure that our residents, as I said, were part of it. Last year we learned that our population is growing even faster than we thought. Our housing plan calls for 53,000 units of new housing by the year 2030. We realized that we're going to get to that goal very quickly. We're more than halfway there. We're there if you take the planning process with it. We're units are in the planning process. We raised our goal to 69,000 by 2030. And we probably will be able to raise that goal again if we continue on the pace we're going. But we're looking at how do we create opportunities. With 69,000 units of new housing by the year 2030, our projected population growth is about 756,000 people in the city of Boston by 2030. We also are working regionally. If you look at Boston, and some people in the room come from bigger cities than Boston, you're thinking, well, how 700,000 is really not big. I come from a city with 7 million people, or I come from a city with 4 million people. What are the challenges? The challenges are that Boston is the economic engine for Massachusetts, and a lot of the jobs are here in Boston. But when I look at Boston, I don't look at Boston, I look at Greater Boston. And when you take Greater Boston, you add that to the numbers of Boston, we grow to about 2.4 million people. So you think about who we are as a city, it's a lot different. And we've been sitting down and working with regional mayors in the abutting cities and towns. There's 13 of us. And we came up with a housing plan to create 185,000 units of new housing by the year 2030, because most of the folks that live in the surrounding cities and towns are literally a train or a bus ride away from being in town within 10, 15, 20 minutes. So we're thinking about how do we make sure we continue to move forward. So that regional housing plan of 185,000 units minus our 69,000, that's part of the plan, there's still a significant amount of housing that's going to be built in the greater Boston area. And we're trying to convince some of our partners to make sure that a lot of that housing is low middle class housing, low income middle class. Areas like Somerville and Cambridge and Chelsea get it. Other areas are a little concerned about it, so it's a process of talking to the communities and letting people know to support this for this type of housing, so we're going to continue to move forward on this. The bottom line is that we have to use every single tool that's available to us to make sure that we create housing, different types of housing in the city. I'm going to get a little wonky with you for a minute here, and then I'll take some questions in a couple minutes. Since the starting point of our housing plan, we've permitted 29,000 units of new housing in Boston since 2014. Of those, nearly 5,600 are deed-restricted affordable units. We've maintained our 1 in 5 ratio of income-restricted housing, and as far as we know, we're the highest ratio of any city our size in the country. If we're wrong, there's somebody in this room that will tell us or figure that out, so I appreciate that. But the fact is that we remain a high-demand, high-cost city. So we've set a top priority in the city of Boston to the goal of limiting displacement from our neighborhoods. We've created an Office of Housing Stability, which Sheila can talk about later, to help people facing displacement and work with landlords on solutions. It's been a huge success. I've personally gotten calls from people that I know that will say that the bank is coming after them or the landlords are coming after them, and I've called this office myself, and they don't have to call me to get access to this office. And we're out there helping people stay in their homes. We've enacted regulations on short-term rentals like Airbnb, which are taking too much of our housing off the market. That's a challenge that we're in the beginning. I'm not sure how the regulations are going to work or if they're going to work, but we're working to make, because we don't have information from Airbnb. And we're going to be working with these different opportunities and organizations to see, because it's making a major dent in our city. We're creating housing, and we didn't realize a lot of our housing that we're building and creating was going to Airbnb. That wasn't the intention, that wasn't the approval. The approval was rental units. That was the approval for neighborhoods. So we're going to be working to continue to keep an eye on that. We've been buying homes off the open market and putting income restrictions on them. We're looking at how can we buy some of these places, and then working with CDCs and nonprofits and opportunities so we can buy some of these housing so we keep it affordable. We're trying to be as creative as possible. Preventing displacement is also a major focus. We put a package of legislation at the state, and we're looking at displacement. We have a bill that would guarantee tenants the right of legal counsel in an eviction proceeding. Tenants don't have that right today. They go to housing court, they have nobody with them, the other side is a lawyer, and they're in front of a judge, and you know what the case, you know what's going to happen there. 99 out of 100, or maybe 999 out of 1,000, the tenant's going to lose because they have no idea the way the process works for courts. We have a bill that's going to protect our elderly tenants from excessive rent increases, where people come in and buy buildings and they want to get empty out the building, they raise the rent. We have a bill that will protect our senior citizens. We thought about how do we do this, and we figured that, I don't think rent control works today. I think it's a very complicated process. But basically what we're doing here for our elderly is making sure that there's controls and protections for our seniors. Something that was really important for us. And again, it's a way to start a conversation, have a dialogue to see how it works. We have a bill that would guarantee tenants association to buy a building that they live in if it's on the market. So when somebody wants to sell their home, tenants or an association can come together, will have a first right of refusal of that building to be able to come in and buy a building, so that these buildings aren't emptied out and condoed. There's an opportunity for us, and we're going to be working. That just started the bill, and we're actually looking at that idea right now in the city. How do we help? Separate from our housing plan, we've also transformed our approach to homelessness in Boston. Every city represented here today, most of your cities represented here today, have a huge problem with homelessness. And what do? We've turned our shelter system into a housing system. We have coordinators and intake people and counselors working with people. We've worked with the other associations and the other homeless providers in the city of Boston. We know now who's on the streets of Boston, where they come from, and we know if somebody new shows up, who they are. In the last 4 years, we've been able to get 1,600 chronically homeless people into permanent housing. We've taken over 4,500 years of homelessness off the streets of Boston. But every time we get somebody off the street, there's somebody else. And we still have issues with people that don't want to come off the street because they have mental health or substance abuse issues. So we're working to make sure that our system continues to move forward. We're raising funds to build hundreds of more units of permanent supportive housing. I got reelected in 2017, and at my kickoff on 2018, usually I have this big ball. I didn't have a ball because that was a waste of money, and what I did was I challenged people in Boston to donate to a fund called Boston's Way Home Fund. So I could have raised $2 million and had a nice party that would have lasted for me about 3 minutes and everyone else having a good time and spent $2 million on it. Or we've already raised almost $6 million from Boston community business leaders to build housing, and we're $4 million away from our goal of $10 million, where we're going to work with Pine Tree Inn and building supportive housing for over 200 more individuals. So that's things that we have to continue to think of. We ended chronic veterans homelessness. Michelle Obama challenged us in 2015. Mayors across America, I was in a room and I said, she challenged us all to end chronic veterans homelessness by the end of the year. It was March, and I had no idea what I was doing. I said, absolutely, Boston's in. And I came home and I called Chair. I go, I think I did something that you have to figure out. And she did, and they did. And Lyra Bernstein, I don't think Lyra's here, but Lyra put together a plan, and that year alone we housed over 500 chronically homeless veterans, and from that point on, I think we've housed over 800 chronically homeless veterans in the city of Boston. We're on a path to ending all chronic homelessness in our city. Our goal was the end of last year, but we didn't get there because it's a challenging population. And there are a lot of challenges there, but our goal, we're not going to stop until we continue to move forward and do that. But we still have a lot to do. This week, I'm about to unveil our city budget on Wednesday. Overall, next year's budget is going to have $125 million for housing. Of that, $59,000 will be spent on production and preservation of affordable housing. This is on top of what we've already done, by the way. This is all new money. This is more money that we're putting in our budget. We've increased our commitment to build supportive housing for the homeless by 44%. We're putting resources into innovation and budgeting, $650,000 into no-interest loans, so income-eligible homeowners can create additional dwelling spaces. This is in 3-family units of housing. Oftentimes, the basement is free, and we're trying to work to keep people in their neighborhoods. Don't worry about it. And we're going to be putting money so people can convert their basements into another unit of housing, so they can move forward. Lastly, one of the things that's frustrating for me is I've been in politics for 20 years. I was a legislator at the State House, and I felt my job as a legislator was to support the city of Boston, but cities and towns, and help them with programming. And our federal government, of which Mike was part of, is there to support our state and our cities down, and it funnels down. In the last couple of years, we have zero federal partner. We don't have a housing plan, and there's no discussion of housing. I did not talk about the Boston Housing Authority today. The Boston Housing Authority is our public housing, of which in 2015 was the first time in the history of the city that the city had to make an investment in our housing authority, meaning we had to take money from our bottom line, from our side of the ledger, and put it into our federal housing program because of the cutbacks. And we have to do that every single year. And it's very difficult. And it's been very frustrating. I went down to Washington a couple weeks ago, and I sat down with Jim McGovern and Richie Neal and some other folks about really thinking about a housing plan, and that's one of the top priorities the Democratic legislature will do in Congress this year is work on a housing plan. But it's so important that we have it because the housing crisis demands a national solution. It can't be nickel and diming, and we're not nickel and diming, we're putting millions into different areas, but we need a national solution. We need to make sure that we continue to make investments. I'm very grateful to Senator Warren for her piece of legislation, the American Housing and Economic Mobility Act. It would put billions of dollars into affordable housing, something that Boston and other cities across America would love to see happen. It would put special focus on communities that suffer under housing discrimination in the past, where redlining occurred. These are important steps in reducing the wealth gap that we have developed in our country. It's also would be a good fit for having vital funding and resources available to the city of Boston. We need Congress to pass this, and we need them to act on this. We need them to have a real conversation about housing. Don't clump housing with the other stuff, as I said with transportation. Don't clump the environmental into transportation. Don't have these clean bills that go through Congress, because it's important for us to focus on these issues, because what happens is if you put something on a bill that goes to the Senate, it's a non-starter, it doesn't help us. 5 years ago, we saw a trend in Boston. We took action. We committed to making sure that we're going to continue to work on this issue. This is what, as mayor, I often get asked, what's the most important issue in the city? They're all the most important issues in the city, depending on who you talk to. Housing is at the very top of the list. And we're going to continue to do what we have to do. We're going to continue to be part of the national conversation. I want to thank you all for being here today. I want to thank you for elevating this conversation. I want to thank the organizations that are here today. I didn't mention you, but I appreciate you being here. I appreciate you caring about this issue. This is about the future of America. Job creation, transportation. But if you don't have a place to live, we're going to have other issues that we're going to have to deal with in the next 10, 20, 30 years here in this country. So I want to thank you all for being here. I look forward, I know Sheila's going to have a bunch of ideas for you and hear some ideas from all of us. I'd love to take a couple questions if you have any.
Great. Thank you, Mayor. I know that you've got time pressures, so the question's going to be snappy.
Okay.
Can you just say quickly who you are as you ask the question? Who'd like to go first?
If you don't have any either, that's fine.
Britta Fisher from Denver, and getting 800 chronically homeless veterans off the street and housed is a great accomplishment. What do you think was key to that success?
In that particular case, a lot of it was homeowners willing to open their homes up. I think, particularly with the veterans. In the BHA, well, the BHA too. But I think that, telling the story of what our veterans do for our country, it seems, maybe I'm wrong, Sheila can correct me, it seems a little easier to get veterans into housing, chronic veterans, than some of our other population, because you're able to tell a little bit of a story with the veterans and incentivize some folks. But we have a great system here in Boston too, so we didn't start at zero. We have the New England Home for Veterans that had a real good kind of narrative on all of our veterans and be able to help them out here. We still have veterans on the streets of Boston that won't come in. But I think, our Boston Housing Authority stepped up in a big way, but also private homeowners open their doors to veterans, and I think that that's an important aspect.
Another question?
High demand for land, for housing, normally has to do with high land prices. Is there anything that you may be thinking of taking some of this land, higher land prices, as part of the funding for the housing?
Well, we're using some of our land that we own. The City of Boston has a pretty good amount of land that we own. So we're using our land, which the land cost is zero, and trying to build some affordable housing on there. And then we work with our CDC. So what happens is, if we have a building that somebody's building high land costs and they're building high-end housing, if you will, and they want to buy off that high-end housing, they'll buy into a CDC project in the community or an affordable project in the community. And we've changed the inclusionary development. Before you could be in downtown Boston, and you could say, okay, I want to put my money into High Park, which is 10 miles away. Now we've broken regions around those projects. So it's not only, what's happening is not only are CDCs trying to create more housing in neighborhoods, but around these areas where these developments are, they're trying to figure projects there as well. Can they keep some of the money into the downtown projects or in South Boston or Charlestown? So we don't have money per se to buy pieces of land, although we're looking at some of the stuff because the costs are high. Let me think how I answer this. Two things. Our land, trying to build more affordable housing on our land. We're exploring right now in Uplands Corner, which is a part of Boston. We're exploring the opportunity of the city partnering with a nonprofit and buying buildings. So, for example, we bought the Bank of America. Bank of America had a bank in Uplands Corner. It went on the market. The city of Boston bought it. We're buying it, so we're looking at exploring how do we do growing a neighborhood through economic development and housing without gentrification and without displacement. And we're trying this program right now in this area of the city that we own a significant amount of land in the Main Street. It's a business district. We just purchased through a nonprofit some other lands, and we just put out 4 RFPs, requests for proposal, for mixed-use development, housing, middle class, low income, economic development, and we're going to try and see how we create this neighborhood without displacing folks. Because when people see a neighborhood change around, see the storefronts change, then all of a sudden the houses in the neighborhood start to pop and sell. So we're trying to be creative here. It's going to be complicated. I'm not sure if we're going to be successful, but until somebody comes to me and shows me how they've done it without displacement, we're going to continue to try every option we can have. I don't know if that answers your question, but yeah.
Squeeze in one last question. There was gentleman.
Mr. Mayor, Rushmore Cervantes, City of Los Angeles. Thank you very much for being here. With the need to create greater density, how are you dealing? Well, you already kind of just touched on displacement, which is a big issue for all cities as we try to demolish and create greater density. But how are you dealing with NIMBYism?
The first 3 years was great. We built everything and people were happy and no one complained. And now everyone has a problem with it and complaining. And when I say complaining, the concerns, I guess. It's tough. It's tough because elected officials, in some cases, won't stand up and lead. And when you have a room full of people that don't want a proposal development, it's easy to side with people. But sometimes you need to stand up and do what's right. And I think that I went to a neighborhood meeting the other night in a part of Boston, and I was questioned on the housing stock. I was questioned on the lack of affordability. I was questioned on people being priced out and pushed out. And then I switched gears to a couple developments that the community group voted down. And I think we have to do a better job. I have to do a better job. Cities have to do a better job. Advocates have to do a better job of tying the need for housing, that this just isn't a proposal that's being built in the community, that this is needed for your community and the benefits, what that would add to your community. So, for example, it would add more people to your Main Street districts. It would add more people to shop in your stores. It would add more people to worship in your houses of worship. It would add more people to be part of a community. I think we have to do a better job of explaining that out. And I think elected officials, when I say this, and this will get me in trouble, but I think people need to look at the overall plan. We can't fight to build housing for poor people if there's no housing for poor people. And you can't make it up. If we want to do this, we've set a record in Boston the last 5 years. We've built more low-income housing than any other 5-year stretch in the history of our city, but yet we still need to do more. So I think we have to do a job of educating community groups. We have to do a job of educating the people in the South, and we also need to get people to stand up and say this is the right thing to do. When I was a state representative, I would stand up, and Pine Street Inn had 2 proposals over my time as a rep to build a 6-family house on Pleasant Street. The community was against it. I stood up at a meeting and said this is the right thing to do, and they ended up getting the support. And we never heard a problem with Pine Street Inn's house on Pleasant Street ever in the time it's been there. And there was on my old street, there was Pine Street Inn was taking over housing for 20 individual single room occupancy homeless housing. And I said, this is the right thing to do. So we need people to stand up, and if we're going to fight for it, I know it's difficult, but I think there's more people in the community that are quiet, that agree with what we're doing, than the people, the voices fighting it. And then we have groups fighting that we're not building enough affordable housing. So they're fighting us as well. And that's not the intention. It shouldn't be on us, meaning you should advocate for it, but today it seems like it's all attack. Let's attack somebody, and it's the mayor's office today they want to attack, which is fine. People can attack it all day, but we're going to continue to move forward. I think the NIMBYism, though, it's starting to affect us a bit when it comes to building housing, because we do have to build some housing. Some of the money that we get, I talked about the money we're investing in the budget, we're getting that money from high-end housing, from more affluent housing. We're getting some of the money from the payoff for that. So we're just going to keep moving at it, though.
Mayor, thank you so much for your presence, your time. You've been so generous with it, and thank you for your work on these issues.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, everybody.